All right, everybody, get ready, because today we're going deep on something I think we all want more of, and that's happiness.
It's kind of funny, though, isn't it?
It is.
We spend so much time and energy trying to be happy, and sometimes it feels like the harder we try.
The further away it gets.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like almost like a trick your brain plays on you.
Is it like when someone tells you, don't think about a pink elephant? It's the first thing you think about.
A giant pink elephant tap dancing on my head.
Right. And it's the same with happiness.
Oh, so the more we try to force it,
The more we become aware of like every little bit of sadness or joy, and we're constantly measuring it up.
yeah, and that just leads to disappointment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get stuck on this treadmill,
Going nowhere fast.
going nowhere, and then we kind of we look to external things like, oh, if I could just get this job or this car, then I would be happy.
Oh, yeah, or more Instagram followers.
Right, more followers, and then we achieve those things and we're still not happy.
Right, and so then what?
So then we look inward.
Well, so one of the sources we're looking at today talks about how pursuing pleasure directly can actually backfire.
Yeah, it makes sense though, right?
Yeah, like so
Well, if you're constantly looking for that next high, you're never going to be content with what you have.
yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, even Nathaniel Hawthorne.
The Scarlet Letter guy.
Yeah, he said happiness is like a butterfly. The more you chase it, the more it will elude you. But if you turn your attention to other things, it will come and sit softly on your shoulder.
That's beautiful.
Isn't it?
So it sounds like what he's saying is we shouldn't make happiness the goal.
Right, because when we do that, we're actually setting ourselves up for failure.
Like we're always going to fall short.
Exactly.
So then what do we do?
Well, there's this idea called the paradox of hedonism.
Paradox of hedonism. Never heard of it.
It basically means that the more we seek pleasure for its own sake.
The less pleasure we actually get.
Exactly.
Wow, so we're kind of doing it all wrong.
In a way, yeah.
Okay, I'm glad we're having this conversation then.
Yep.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's helpful to look at the work of Viktor Frankl.
He's the guy who survived the concentration camps, right?
Yes, and his experiences gave him a really unique perspective on happiness.
So what did he have to say?
He said that happiness can't be pursued, it must ensue.
It must ensue? What does that even mean?
It means that happiness is a byproduct of living a meaningful life.
So it's not the goal itself.
Exactly.
Oh, so instead of chasing happiness, we should be focusing on.
Finding meaning and purpose in our lives.
Okay, that makes sense.
And when we're engaged in something, we truly care about something that gives us a sense of purpose, that's when we experience true happiness.
So it's like finding that thing that makes you lose track of time.
Exactly. And you know what's really interesting?
What's that?
Studies have shown that people who place a huge emphasis on happiness are actually less happy overall.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's because they're setting themselves up for disappointment.
So the more they focus on being happy.
The less happy they actually become.
Wow, that's kind of mind-blowing. It is, isn't it?
So what does all of this mean for us?
I think it means we need to rethink our relationship with happiness.
Maybe it's time to step off that happiness treadmill and reflect on what truly matters. And maybe even embrace some of those emotions we tend to shy away from.
Like sadness.
Exactly. Because what if sadness actually has something to teach us?
What if it does? It is interesting you bring up sadness because one of the things we were looking at talked about this dad who was just wrecked with sadness because he felt like he had let his son down.
Yeah, I remember that. And it made me think about like those times where you feel like you messed up as a parent and just that heavy feeling.
It's interesting because the writer kind of tied that story into some old poetry by Rainer Maria Rilke.
Poetry. Okay, this is getting deep now. I like it.
Rilke kind of had this crazy idea that we should almost be more comfortable with sadness than we are with happiness.
Wait, hold up. Are you saying we should be looking forward to being sad? Not exactly. I think what he meant was that we shouldn't run from sadness. We should see it as something valuable, like a learning experience.
Okay. I'm starting to see where you're going with this. So instead of trying to bury sadness or ignore it, maybe we need to face it head on.
Yeah, because maybe within that sadness, there's a chance for us to learn and grow,
I love that. Yeah, instead of being afraid of sadness, it's more like, okay, sadness is here. Let's figure out what it's trying to tell us.
And when you think about it, we've all been through tough times, right? And when we come out on the other side, we're not the same people.
Yeah, sometimes it's like those tough times make us stronger or make us appreciate the good times even more.
So maybe sadness isn't the enemy. It's more like a teacher.
I like that. Okay, so we've talked about how chasing happiness directly can backfire and how sadness has its own value. But what's the alternative? What are we supposed to be aiming for then?
Well, that's where the idea of fulfillment comes in.
Because at the end of the day, it's not about feeling happy all the time, right? It's about feeling like your life has meaning and purpose.
Exactly. And that feeling of purpose actually leads to a much deeper and more lasting happiness.
This reminds me of something we were reading about, the theory of emptiness.
Oh, yeah. It basically says that a lot of times when people feel empty, it's not because they aren't happy, it's because their lives lack meaning.
So you could have everything you thought would make you happy, money, a family, a nice house, and still feel empty inside.
Yeah, because those things are external, but fulfillment comes from within.
So then how do we find that fulfillment?
Well, this is where things get really interesting because there's this concept called the Übermensch.
The what, man?
The Übermensch, yeah, it's a German word.
Sounds intense.
It's not as complicated as it sounds. It basically means striving to be the best version of yourself.
So always pushing yourself to grow and learn and become a better person.
Yeah, exactly. And it's in that journey of self-improvement that we find true fulfillment.
I see. So it's not about reaching some end goal. It's about the journey itself.
And speaking of journeys, one of the other sources we looked at talked about the difference between external and internal validation.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. It's like how we're always looking for approval from others. Likes on social media, praise from our boss.
But when we rely on external validation, it prevents us from finding true fulfillment.
Because we're giving away our power to decide what matters.
Exactly. We're letting other people dictate our worth.
And that keeps us stuck in this endless cycle of chasing external things instead of focusing on what truly matters to us.
And the only way to break free from that cycle is to cultivate a sense of worth from within.
So how do we actually do that?
Well, that's where some of the more practical advice comes in.
Okay, I'm all ears. I love some practical advice. Let's hear it.
Well, one of the sources actually had a bunch of really good strategies based on the Stoics.
The Stoics, those guys were all about keeping it cool no matter what, right?
Yeah, they believed that true happiness came from having a good attitude even when things are tough. And one of their key ideas was focusing on what you can control.
That makes sense. I mean, there's so much in life that we can't control.
Exactly, like the weather or traffic or what other people think of us.
Right, but we can control how we react to those things.
And when we shift our focus from worrying about things we can't change to taking action on the things we can, it's pretty powerful.
So focus on what we can control. Got it. What else?
Another big one for the Stoics was the idea of wanting less.
Wanting less in a world that's always telling us we need more of everything.
It seems counterintuitive, but it's about finding contentment in what we already have instead of always chasing that next thing.
Yeah, it's like being grateful for what we have instead of always wanting more.
And the last Stoic strategy I wanted to mention is simplification.
Simplifying our lives.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
taking a step back and looking at our thoughts, our actions, our possessions, and asking ourselves, do we really need all this stuff?
Does it really bring us joy?
Because if it doesn't, maybe it's time to let it go.
Okay, I'm loving this Stoic wisdom. What else have we got?
Well, one of the sources talk a lot about the importance of self-love.
Self-love. How do you actually practice that, though?
It's about being as kind and compassionate to ourselves as we would be to a friend or a loved one, you know?
Yeah, instead of beating ourselves up for our mistakes.
Exactly. We need to give ourselves permission to be imperfect.
I like that. What else?
It's also really helpful to reflect on our progress instead of focusing on what we haven't achieved yet.
Yeah, taking time to celebrate our wins.
And finally, it's important to accept all of our feelings, even the negative ones.
That's a tough one sometimes.
It is, but when we try to suppress our emotions, they tend to just build up inside.
And then they explode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's better to just acknowledge them and let ourselves feel them.
That makes sense. So it sounds like we've got a lot of work to do.
We do, but it's exciting work, right?
It is. It's like we're on a journey to discover our own personal version of happiness.
And it's a journey worth taking.
Well said. Well, that's about all the time we have for today, but I hope this deep dive has given you some new insights into the nature of happiness.
And some practical strategies for cultivating more of it in your own life.
Remember, happiness is not a destination. It's a journey. And it's a journey we can all choose to embark on.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and until next time, keep seeking that true fulfillment that comes from within.
We'll see you next time. Bye.